Howdy my totally always Tubular gamers, we're back with, you guessed it, another video. Thanks for coming back to the channel. If you're new here, stick around for a while. I got a fun ranking video for you. Today we're going to be talking about Monster Jam games. So you know Monster Jam, right? Maybe? No? Are you American? Do you know Monster Trucks? You probably know Monster Jam then. It is the live motorsport event that really tours around the entire world nowadays, not just the US. It's about monster trucks doing monster truck things like crushing cars, the occasional flip, getting like 2 miles to the gallon. People just love seeing cars with giant wheels crush things and go off of jumps. I've been to several Monster Jams here in California and I've enjoyed every single one. It's always a good time. And naturally, there's been some video games about Monster Jam. So for today's video, I'm going to be ranking every Monster Jam game from worst to best. Oh yeah, we're breaking out the licensed kids games here. I'm going to be stacking them up against each other, giving each one of them a little review since I do have a bit to say about every single one. We'll be seeing which ones are worth your time and which ones should get crushed under the truck. When it comes to how I'm ranking these games, I'm going to be looking at the truck roster, how the trucks feel, the physics, how much content there is it super repetitive, is it actually even a fun game to begin with? We're kind of looking at everything. As per usual with my lists, I'm not looking at mobile games or browser-based games. This needs to have released on a game console. A home console to be specific. I'm also talking about Monster Jam video games, not monster truck games. There's other monster truck games that don't feature Monster Jam. I'm talking about video games that feature the Monster Jam license. Is Gravedigger in it? Is El Toro Loco or Maximum Destruction in it? If they're not, it's probably not a Monster Jam game, but I'm open to hearing about other monster truck games. Now, when it comes to a lot of these Monster Jam games, I actually have quite a bit of nostalgia. I grew up with several of these games when I was just getting started on YouTube. I tried to do reviews of like all of these games. I can't say they're particularly good reviews, but those videos are actually still up. And while I'm not particularly proud of those videos or the first time I ranked Monster Jam games, I know some people are nostalgic for them, so I've just left them up. But anyway, I've been rambling on long enough. Let's get right into the list. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. I got the Patreon and the super thanks. Let me know your favorite Monster Jam game down below. If you made it to even this part of the video, you're awesome. So what's the worst of the Monster Jam games? I think the weakest of the Monster Jam games is Monster Jam Crush It, which was released on the PS4 and Xbox. I remember when this came out, I had no idea it was releasing or about to release. I was just looking at new games on the PlayStation Store and went, wait, I've never heard of this Monster Jam game. Went and got it, played through the whole game in like one sitting, and went, yeah, this game, it's not very good. So this game is very similar to the Trials series of games. If you're unfamiliar with those games, it is the 2D physics-based motorbike games that are all about getting from point A to B and going through a little obstacle course, and you really have to manage your momentum and you want to try to get the fastest time. And when it comes to this game's structure, yeah, it's not all that different from Trials. Usually you're just trying to get from point A to B through the obstacle course. Sometimes there's explosive barrels. Sometimes you're just trying to get through the course as fast as possible. Sometimes you even got to go Donkey Kong Country mode and collect some letters. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what you're doing. You're really just trying to go from point A to B and put up with the game's, we'll just say, lacking physics. While a majority of the game is going through these 2D obstacle courses, there are some 3D moments where you get put in the stadium and you actually have to do a race or two. And they might even ask you to do a freestyle. And if you know Monster Jam, you know that's where you're doing tricks and not rapping. Now, what makes this game so bad? Why is this the worst of the Monster Jam games? It's the physics and the controls. This game has the worst physics I've seen of any Monster Jam game. It doesn't lean on the simulation side or the arcade side. It's this weird middle ground that just doesn't really work at all. The physics and really the trucks in general just feel incredibly unresponsive. They don't react at all how you would expect them to. They just kind of flop around and roll all over the place. They have zero weight to them. They get stuck on everything and it just doesn't feel nice to control. In the 2D sections, it's not good, but in the 3D sections, oh, it's really bad. Easily the worst 3D sections legit of any Monster Jam game. These are terrible and the physics just feel downright unfinished. Like you'll do things and the game has no idea how to react to it and it'll just send you flying into the air. And these stadiums aren't well designed either. How do you mess up a stadium? You can literally just base it off real life. These races are awful too. They're like 10 seconds long and there's not even a dozen of them. When it comes to the 2D sections, which is a majority of the game, it really doesn't fare much better. These obstacle courses are super basic, incredibly easy to get through. It kind of just feels like you're coasting a majority of the time, or you're just barely scraping by because the physics aren't working well with you. They aren't engaging or exciting. There's no interesting set pieces, and then the game's over before you know it. And that's fine with me because I wasn't liking this game. When it comes to the monster truck selection, it's pretty basic and nothing special here. At least the game's an easy platinum, but even with that, I can't recommend this game to anybody, not even the most die-hard of Monster Jam game fans. Like, everybody should steer clear of this one, pun absolutely intended. And so here we have Monster Jam Battleground. So this game came out a bit before Monster Jam Crush It and is in the same style, and I would say that it's slightly, yes, slightly better. The game is again a mix of 2D and 3D. During the 2D sections, it's more like trials where you got to get through the obstacle course, but there are some other little objectives that'll show up here. And it is somewhat momentum and physics based. During the 3D sections, you'll be doing freestyle, races, the usual Monster Jam stuff, and I'll just say, it is better than Battlegrounds, but not by much here. While the truck selection wasn't terrible for the time and the presentation wasn't god-awful, since this is clearly a low-budget like Xbox Live Arcade game, it does not save this game from being anything above mediocre at best. Like Crush It, the biggest issue with this game is the physics, handling, and controls. It's just not very good in any of those aspects. These trucks have no weight, they're incredibly unresponsive. Again, they just kind of bounce all over the place. They don't react in ways that would make like any sense, and a lot of the time it feels like you just kind of spin out, and it kind of ruins like the entire game. These obstacle courses become rather annoying thanks to the physics, and the 3D sections, yeah, they're just not very good when it comes to the controls. At least in the 3D sections you get to do real freestyle, it's not just get airtime, but these physics and controls don't exactly make it fun. Some races show up in the 3D sections, but like the prior game, these are so short that they're barely even worth mentioning. The objective mode feels a little better since it's like, oh, do a really long ass jump, or try to do this in the obstacle course, but these still aren't enjoyable. Again, these courses are just not exciting, they don't have any fun set pieces, they're the opposite of challenging, and the physics just kind of ruin everything. If you've ever played Trials, you know how important, how integral the physics are to literally every aspect of the game. The difficulty, the level design, it all hinges on the physics being consistent, cohesive, and making some damn sense. This game shows what happens when the physics don't make any sense, and as you can see, the entire game basically just falls apart. Like, they can include all these modes and obstacle courses, but if it's not fun to control the vehicle and it doesn't ever feel like you have a good grip on it, what's the point? While I think this game is slightly better than Crush It, I still couldn't recommend this to even the most die-hard of Monster Jam fans, and I think this one's actually been delisted, so you're really not missing anything with it. And so here we have the very first Monster Jam game, Monster Jam Maximum Destruction, specifically the PS2 and GameCube version that came out in the early 2000s. Yes, I am aware there was a GBA version, but I've never played any handheld Monster Jam games. So this game is pretty different from legit any other Monster Jam game. It's actually a vehicular combat game in the vein of Twisted Metal. And my opinion has shifted a little bit on this game throughout the years. While I don't think it's absolutely awful and the worst Monster Jam game of them all, I still don't think it's a very good game. I know a lot of people have some fond memories and nostalgia with this one, but it just never really hit with me. I will say when it comes to the truck selection, it was very good for the time. It has all the licensed trucks like Spider-Man and Wolverine in there, which I don't think have ever shown up in another Monster Jam game. But funny enough, the monster truck name Maximum Destruction isn't actually in this game because it didn't exist yet. It came out a few years later. But even a good truck selection isn't going to save this game. It's still a shallow, mediocre car combat experience where you slowly drive around these arenas, picking up weapons and blasting the other opponents. And while that all sounds great on paper, this game just does not come together. It's way too slow for its own good. It leads to it feeling rather dull. This game has no sense of speed, it feels like there's no stakes, and the maps are just way too big. They're not very well designed. It's easy to get lost and confused in them, and finding your opponents sometimes is even a challenge. The AI is terrible in this game. They'll literally just do donuts or smack into the wall over and over. I'm not exaggerating. They are very bad. The weapon balancing, or really lack of balancing, is all over the place. Some weapons are just borderline useless, while other ones just almost instantly destroy other cars, and you can get totally wrecked yourself if the AI get off a lucky shot. Yeah, this game, it's just kind of full of issues. At least there are some other mini games that show up, and these aren't terrible. They're not gonna save the game by any means, but they're not the worst thing ever. At least the multiplayer is a bit of fun. I mean, at the end of the day, it still is a car combat game, and you still can have a little fun with the multiplayer. I'd rather play this game over Crush It and Battleground, but that's really not saying much. I still couldn't recommend this game to even the most die-hard of Monster Jam people. And here we have Monster Jam Steel Titans. Now, I remember when this game was announced and released, and I was a little hyped for it. It was the first, like, real big, non-budget Monster Jam game in almost 10 years. It was by THQ Nordic, and it even ran on Unreal Engine 4. And I gotta say, when it comes to the presentation, this game is pretty decent. There's some good-looking environments, and the trucks look good, but the presentation doesn't save this game. This game tries to have a somewhat different structure from the prior Monster Jam games. It has this big open environment you can explore. There is actually free roam here, and then a bunch of events you can do. There's even some events that take place in this open world rather than taking place in the stadium, but unfortunately the open world just completely falls apart. It's giant, empty, and there's nothing to do in it. All there is to do is collect these tokens. And then it feels like the game doesn't even take advantage of the open world either, as a majority of the events take place in these stadiums. They don't even utilize these big open areas, and that's a real shame. But hey, there are good games with big empty open worlds, so what else is wrong with this game? Well, you can probably already guess where I'm going to go next, but the controls and the physics are just not very good in this game. The game really just cannot decide if it's going to be an arcade racer or a simulation racer, and it just kind of is in this middle ground, and instead of appealing to one group of people, it appeals to no one. It's just this odd mix, and it feels incredibly unresponsive. The truck handling and physics in general are just incredibly inconsistent and straight up wonky. Controlling these trucks can be really imprecise, and at times it feels like they have a mind of their own. It never feels like you have a great grasp on the truck. It uses the dual analog approach where the left stick is the front wheels and the right stick is the back wheels, but again, it just doesn't feel all that nice to control, and at times it feels like the physics don't even know what to do. It just feels unpolished and quite clunky. The collision detection isn't very good in this game either. So with the open world being a bust and the controls / physics and handling not being very good, what else is wrong with the game? Well, it's also extremely repetitive. They want you to grind events over and over and over to get all of the trucks, and that's about as much fun as it sounds. There was no online multiplayer at launch, which was a really odd decision for a PS4 game that came out in 2019. But hey, at least the truck selection is decent, so that's something, right? Maybe I'm being a bit harsh on this game, but it really did disappoint me. I was like, first new big Monster Jam game in like 10 years. It was by Rainbow Studios, who made the excellent MX vs. ATV series. And then the game was just aggressively mid. Like at best it was mediocre, and at worst it was just this empty repetitive slog with some of my favorite monster trucks ever. Either way, I really don't recommend this one, and I think that there are plenty of better Monster Jam games out there. So this might be a little bit of a hot take, but I have Monster 4x4 Masters of Metal, and if you're hearing that and going, wait, this isn't a Monster Jam game, then you clearly haven't seen the game before. While it might not have Monster Jam in the title, this very much is a Monster Jam game. It features only Monster Jam trucks. But I will mention that this game got a sequel that has absolutely nothing to do with Monster Jam, so it's not going to be on this list. But anyway, back to Masters of Metal. I say it's a little bit of a hot take because plenty of people have told me that this is one of the better Monster Jam games, but every time I've come back to this game, it just does not really resonate with me. But don't get it twisted, I don't think this is a bad game. This is the first good game I'm actually talking about today, and the game has plenty of pros. Something unique it has is a story mode. Yeah, this is the only Monster Jam game with a real story mode, and I mean, it's nothing revolutionary here, but it's cool a story mode exists. And while playing through this, there's actually a decent amount of variety. It's not just race, the occasional freestyle event. No, there's actually some other events going on here, like going through obstacle courses, like this capture the flag mode. There's actually a few game modes here. Variety is one of this game's strengths, and it actually is cool that they try to do more than just, hey, do some flips or race the other trucks. And speaking of racing, you'll be going through plenty of environments here. While there are plenty of stadiums you'll drive through, you actually get to go through some bigger open areas, and yeah, that's pretty cool. These are decently designed. I'd say the tracks are, yeah, decently laid out. But alright, let's get to the nitty gritty. Let's talk about the controls, the physics, and the feel, since that low-key ruined the other games. How is it in this game? It's not terrible. This is the first game on the list where I can say it's not awful. It's not great or even all that good in my opinion, and it takes a good amount of time to get used to, but it's decent at best. They definitely lean more on the arcade side rather than the simulation side, and while I have my gripes with it and the collision detection is terrible, it could certainly be worse. Turning can be a little bit of an issue. It feels a little awkward. In fact, the controls in general can feel a bit awkward. They can feel rather stiff. Bouncing around all over the place can get old quickly. And yeah, the trucks generally can feel a bit unresponsive, especially when you're flying into the air over and over. But the trucks at least have some weight to it. It's okay. And I can say at the very least it was consistent. The physics were actually very consistent throughout the game, and sometimes consistency is all you need. Even if it's not that great, as long as it's consistently not that great, the physics will be okay and you'll be able to adapt and actually be able to predict how the truck is going to react off jumps, certain turns, etc. They're not terrible, but I certainly have seen a hell of a lot worse. Okay, now that my physics tangent is over, I will say I do actually have a good amount of nostalgia for this game, particularly the multiplayer. I've had a lot of fun with the multiplayer in this game over the years. Like, even nowadays, I think the multiplayer is still surprisingly decent. And the game has a bunch of wacky shit in it, like power-ups and boosting, to allow it to feel different from really any other monster truck game. At the end of the day, if you're looking for a half-decent racing game that features monster trucks, you could do a heck of a lot worse than this game. And so here we have the latest Monster Jam game, Monster Jam Showdown. I recently just wrapped this game up. It's why I'm doing this entire list, and I've got pretty mixed feelings about it. There are some things I like in this game, and there are some things I don't really care for in this game. So let's get into it. The game doesn't have a story or anything like that. It has Showdown mode, which is essentially a giant list of events spread out across these 3 little maps. And as you do these events, more and more unlock on the other maps, and it just keeps going. The progression is actually pretty solid in this game. You'll get stuff for finishing every single event. You'll get plenty of little rewards. You've got like a player level, which levels up from you winning events on or offline, and you're constantly being rewarded with little prizes, new trucks, etc. That is actually pretty cool. Now, when it comes to the driving and the physics, is it even any good? Yes, it is actually good here. It's actually pretty good. It uses the 2 analog sticks, and you can even boost. It falls more on the arcade side, but the trucks actually have a decent amount of weight to them. I think the physics are actually very consistent. You can predict what's going to happen, and it just makes sense. It's actually well implemented. None of the trucks feel different from each other. It's responsive, but most importantly, it's actually fun to control these trucks. When there's good handling and you know how it's going to react and you can adapt and get used to the physics, it's a good time. The driving is good here. The truck selection is also fantastic. Like, it's one of the best truck selections of any Monster Jam game. It's got so many, very good selection there. It's impressive. The presentation is also impressive. Not only do the trucks look great, but the environments look really good also. It's easily the best looking Monster Jam game of them all. But what are you actually doing in this game? Well, a majority of the game is racing, but there's also freestyle events. While there's no open world to free roam in, you'll still be racing in these bigger, more open environments, and I gotta say, these track designs are actually pretty decent. There's plenty of things for you to crush and destroy. You go off some big jumps, and sure, it's not some of the best tracks I've ever seen in a racing game, but yeah, they're pretty decent. There's plenty of stadium races as well, or really short races, and these are fine. And then the freestyle environments, yeah, they're decent enough. In fact, the freestyling is pretty decent. I got some good rhymes and bars here. Okay, the freestyling is actually good because the physics are responsive, and you can actually get some really big combos going. You can do a bunch of different tricks, really every trick in the Monster Jam book, and trying to chain it all together, yeah, it can actually be fun. The racing can also be decently fun. The AI don't put up a ton of challenge, but again, driving through these courses is alright. The collision detection is about as bad as ever. I'm pretty sure monster truck games are just allergic to good collision detection at this point. I mean, in basically every Monster Jam game, it's really easy to get stuck on the environment or the other trucks, and it's better to just respawn, and that absolutely goes for this game as well. The collision detection, it's pretty bad. But I kind of expect every Monster Jam game to just kind of have bad collision at this point. Oh, it's also worth mentioning the music is pretty decent in this game. I was kind of picking up what this game was putting down. Some of the tracks are fire, but it definitely leans more on the Gen Z side with all of its skibbity Rizzler toilet gyat techno bullshit, but again, I enjoyed it. So it sounds like I enjoyed Monster Jam Showdown quite a bit, so why isn't it way higher on the list? Like I said, I enjoy the feel, the truck selection, and I think the gameplay is actually good. There's just one really big issue with this game. It is crazy repetitive. The game also goes on far too long. So you do freestyle events, you do races, and then you do smaller races. That's all of the event types. And then the game goes on for like 10 hours. It's just event after event after event. And while the track design is decent, You go through these tracks so many freaking times, it just gets so old. The gameplay just gets very stale. It really wears its welcome out incredibly quickly, and after even like the second or third hour, it felt incredibly repetitive, and then it went on for like 3 times that length. There's a reason most Monster Jam games are like 3 to 5 hours, because the gameplay really can't hold up much past that. There's just not really enough depth or complexity or intricate track design to keep the game all that interesting or engaging past the 4 or 5 hour mark. This is what happens when it's longer than like 5 or 6 hours. It just becomes honestly boring, where all the events and tracks really just blend together. I was doing freestyle for hours in this game, and I can tell you, the freestyle gameplay was virtually identical from the first 5 minutes I had with it to the last 5 minutes. I just got bored playing the game, and that really is one of the greatest sins a game can have. I mean, it's a game about monster trucks. How do I get bored? Well, having a bunch of repetitive events one after the next without any variety is how you're gonna get there. So while I think the core gameplay is good, the handling's great, the presentation's solid, and the truck selection is good, unfortunately there's just no variety. It's incredibly repetitive, the events get old, there is online multiplayer, but I couldn't find anybody playing it. And at the end of the day, a majority of the game felt like a chore, and games aren't supposed to feel like a chore. They're supposed to be engaging and fun, and I just wasn't having it with this game by a certain point. I will say though, there is a lot of potential for a sequel if they keep this game's foundation and then just throw in a bunch of different event types and try to keep it more varied and maybe not make it as long. And we could have maybe the best Monster Jam game of them all. As it currently stands, I think Monster Jam fans are going to enjoy it, but outside of that, I really can't recommend this game, unfortunately. And so here we have the Monster Jam game simply titled Monster Jam, which released in 2007. I actually played this game quite a bit as a kid and really loved it as a kid, and even nowadays, yeah, I think it's still actually a pretty decent game. So this game took a very different approach from the prior Monster Jam games and just said, look, we're just gonna let the trucks go absolutely wild. They just went full arcade racer here, and yeah, this game can get pretty crazy at times. There's nothing even close to realistic here. They just let the trucks mow basically everything down. You can drive through essentially everything that isn't bolted to the ground. You can drive through planes and walls and giant slabs of concrete. Yeah, you just completely wreck it. And the game will even reward you with boost. You can boost and actually get some pretty insane speed. A sense of speed isn't really something you get in monster truck games. I mean, I wouldn't expect it, but yeah, you get a sense of speed from this one. You certainly go really fast. When it comes to the track design, it feels like they're set up in a way that you go off a bunch of big jumps and just crash through as much shit as possible, and they're decently designed. Sure, you go through them backwards, and at times it can feel a little repetitive, but I would say the racing in general is pretty decent. Oh, and the collision detection, it's not great. It's fine when you're driving through shit, but you can still get stuck on the environment, and you really do get stuck on the other trucks. Seriously, every Monster Jam game seems to have some kind of issue when you collide with another truck, and this game is no exception. There's plenty of frustrating moments. The AI can also be quite questionable. It feels like at times they're pretty decent, and a lot of the time they have no idea what they're going, crashing into walls or just driving off the side of the cliff. Like, the AI is all over the place. Outside of the racing, there is freestyle to do in this game, and yeah, the freestyle is decent. I mean, the physics go pretty wild in this game in general, so you know the freestyle is going to be a bit goofy, and yeah, you're out here doing a few backflips, and the trucks don't really have much weight to them, but I thought the freestyle was decent enough. This game, it's actually pretty decent to fun. It's a fun little arcade racer that lets you just go totally nuts with these trucks, and sometimes that's all you need. I can just appreciate that they really picked a side and just went full arcade. It feels like a lot of games are like Simcade, where it's like in between them. Not this one. It goes full arcade, and it's a pretty decent time. Something though that I will say I didn't really care for was the truck selection. Even for the time, it was a little weak, I'm not gonna lie. But that's a bit of a minor issue. Overall, if you're looking for a fun, arcadey Monster Jam game, yeah, this is a good one. It's not really widely available anymore as it has been pulled, but I really doubt copies of this game are anywhere near expensive. It's a Monster Jam game. And here we have Monster Jam Steel Titans 2, which came out in 2021. I was pretty lukewarm with the first one, so I was like, they're gonna make another one, really? But then I got it when it came out and was pleasantly surprised. This is actually a pretty decent racing game, and it is a general improvement on the first game. I'll just get into the nitty gritty. Did they fix the physics and controls from the first game? Yes, they actually did. It still is in between arcade and simulation, but the physics are a lot more consistent, responsive, and it generally just feels a lot better. It kind of leans more towards the arcade side, but the trucks still have weight, and at the end of the day, it feels nice. That's all I'm really asking for. Does it feel nice, and is it consistent? And yes, it is that. I would say the collision detection is still ass though, and the trucks like to flip over a lot in this game. But for the most part, yes, the driving and the physics and the handling is actually decent enough. Another thing that they tried to improve on was the open world. This game did bring the free roaming back, and it's a bit better than the first games. There's actually things to see and do in this open world. That's nice. I'd say it's more along the lines of the MX versus ATV open areas. But hey, at least the free roam doesn't feel like you're just driving through these big open empty spaces, and the game actually utilizes this open world. Most of the events take place in the open world. You do races through these big open environments, and the racing is actually decent enough. There's plenty of stadium events as well, and these are all well and good. You do some freestyle, but I'm just glad it's not super repetitive like Steel Titans 1. And there's variety with the environments and the races, and at the end of the day, it's actually fun. And the fun doesn't wear out super fast and you're left with this boring repetitive slog. The game actually has good pacing throughout, and then it just ends. It's only around, the 4 to 5 hour mark. But I'd much rather have a short and sweet game than a game that just takes way too long and fails to hold my interest. This game has plenty of other good aspects. The truck selection is actually pretty good, and the presentation, not only for the time, was good, but it's even good nowadays. This is a more budget game, and yeah, it actually looks good. Now, I'm not going to act like this is one of the greatest racers ever made. It's one of those total hidden gems for the PS4. No, the game's got plenty of little flaws and frustrating moments, but if you like Monster Jam, if you like monster trucks, or you're looking for a pretty casual, fun little racing game that doesn't take itself too seriously, that might feature some of your favorite trucks of all time, well, here's the game to try it. It's actually widely available too. It's one of the most widely available Monster Jam games. I low-key was hoping we'd get a third Steel Titans, but it seems like Rainbow Studios is doing other things like focusing on MX versus ATV and lots of microtransactions. Anyway, this is a good game, and yeah, it's actually worth your time. And so here we have Monster Jam Urban Assault. This game is the follow-up to the 2007 Monster Jam game, and this is genuinely one of the craziest racing games I've ever seen. They really took that 2007 game and just cranked it up. Like, this game just goes balls to the wall crazy. It is easily the craziest monster truck game ever made. And I really wish more monster truck games would take this approach where they're like, let's just make it go as crazy as possible. Like, when it comes to the handling and the feel and the physics, it is nothing even close to realistic. It's more arcade than the 2007 game. These trucks have zero weight to them. They just go flying all over the place. And while I know there are plenty of people that are like, oh, I don't like that, I want my monster trucks to have weight, this game really takes advantage of the fact that the monster trucks really don't have any weight. Normally, I'd agree, yes, I want my trucks to have weight, but this game is made and designed in a certain way where I don't really think it's an issue. I like that they go just balls to the wall, and I think the physics, handling, and controls in general are pretty decent and responsive. It was also incredibly consistent. I felt like I had a good handle on the truck. So while they control nice, what are you driving through? Oh, you get to drive through like everything. You're driving through neighborhoods, city blocks, construction zones, and you're just knocking over everything. Buildings, fences, construction equipment. You really just drive through everything, and nothing is slowing you down. In fact, you get boost for it. You even get points and rewarded for destroying shit. And it's like, finally, I wanted a monster truck game where it just lets me drive through like everything and just cause as much chaos as possible, and that is this game. The 2007 game absolutely had it at moments, but this game, I'm just like, holy moly, we just leveled that entire city block, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. Like, this game's destruction and chaos is just awesome. Awesome, I tell ya. But all of that insanity doesn't end with just the races outside of the stadiums. The stadium races are also pretty crazy. They have you driving through like helicopters and doing big jumps as well. There's plenty of big jumps just throughout this entire game. The freestyle, yeah, it goes nuts also. This is easily the craziest freestyle of any Monster Jam game, where you're doing dozens of backflips. You're doing just these crazy tricks, and you're in the air for so long. Like, it's pretty comical just how wild this game gets and how far away from reality it generally gets. Outside of the stadium events and the races, there are some mini games that show up that are actually pretty similar to the older flat out games, and these, yeah, they're not great, but they're decent enough, and it provides a little bit more variety. And while on the subject of variety, I think there's a good amount of it here, and the pacing is quite well done. The game's only, 3 to 5 hours, and it's a very fun 3 to 5 hours. The game doesn't have a stellar presentation, especially for the late 2000s, but at least the frame rate was pretty solid. The truck selection, it's better than the 2007 game. It's not like exceptional, but I'd say it's pretty decent. But man, I was having so much fun with this game, I was easily able to overlook that. Of course, the collision detection, especially when you collide with other trucks, is a bit questionable, but for the most part, this is pretty enjoyable. If you like Monster Jam or you like arcade racers or what you see here just looks crazy and you want to try it, I recommend that you do. There's no other monster truck game like this, at least that I know of, and I'd really love to see another Monster Jam game in this style. Are we going to get one in this style in the future? Probably not, but hey, at least we got this game and it's pretty good. And then we have what I believe is the best of the Monster Jam games, Monster Jam Path of Destruction, specifically the PS3 and 360 version. Now, it's pretty crazy that this game came out in 2010, and there really hasn't been a Monster Jam game better than this in my opinion. There's also never been a Monster Jam game that's as realistic as this. This game took a very different approach from basically every other Monster Jam game ever made and decided to go as close to reality as possible. This is a very grounded, somewhat realistic racing game. The trucks aren't doing tons of flips and driving through shit. No, it's actually rather realistic. They've got a lot of weight. You'll be lucky to do any flips, and it feels like you really got to control every single wheel on the truck when it comes to the handling and the physics. And really just the controls in general, it's the best of any Monster Jam game. All these years later, I don't think any Monster Jam game has as tight of controls as this game does. It feels great, they handle well, and the physics are very consistent and make sense. The trucks have just never felt this good, and most of them actually feel decently different from each other, something I can't say about legit any other Monster Jam game. And the collision detection, it's actually okay in this game. Colliding with other trucks isn't this doom and gloom where you get stuck on them. It's not great, but it's better than any other Monster Jam game. This was the Monster Jam game that introduced the 2 analog sticks for driving the truck, and this is the one that did it the best. The other games, yeah, are decent enough, but this, it just feels like you have a lot of control, and it really is the best part of this game. And the game is designed around these somewhat realistic physics. You aren't driving through neighborhoods or construction sites, it's all stadium events, but there's actually a decent amount of variety and decent track design for these stadium races. They all have a nice flow to them, there's a decent amount of variety, and it's just fun. There's freestyle as well, and the freestyle is very rooted in reality. You're not doing 10 backflips of freestyle, you're lucky to do a few at most, and chaining everything together, it makes for a pretty satisfying time. It might be the best freestyle in any Monster Jam game. It's certainly not the craziest, not even close. But I really did have a lot of fun with this. I had a lot of fun with the main World Tour mode, where you actually do go around the world, go through different stadiums, and some people might not like it's only stadiums, but I think there's enough variety and they mix things up enough to the point where, no, it doesn't feel repetitive. It doesn't get stale, at least it didn't get stale for me, and the game ends before it truly gets old. It's got a good length to it, around the 5 to 10 hour mark if you want to like 100% it. There's actually a little bit of replayability here. There's a decent to good truck selection as well, a bunch of trucks that had never shown up in a Monster Jam game were here, like Mohawk Warrior, and for the time it was like the best truck roster that anyone had seen in a Monster Jam game. The presentation was pretty decent as well. The trucks look nice and the environments are alright. Look, it doesn't look amazing for 2010, but this was clearly a much more budget game. And at the very least it had a rather smooth and stable frame rate. Something else that this game actually really has, that really it feels like no other Monster Jam game has, is it's able to capture the spectacle of Monster Jam. When you go to a Monster Jam in person, seeing the truck do even one flip or doing some of these big jumps or crushing a car or racing the other trucks, it's a spectacle. That's why you go to Monster Jam. And this game, it really feels like it actually captures that, thanks to it being more rooted in reality. When you do a backflip, when you drive over a bus, man, it's actually satisfying and it's cool. And it doesn't get done to death, and you don't get desensitized to it either, like you do in several other Monster Jam games where it's like, okay, I've crushed like 100 cars in the last hour, I've gone off 20 big jumps. No, this game, it's not like that, and it's one of my favorite things about this game. Overall, I think this really is the best Monster Jam game, it's the best monster truck game, and all these years later, it still is quite impressive. The only thing that sucks about this game is that it's not widely available. I don't think any Monster Jam game has ever been re-released. In fact, most of the games I talked about today have been delisted, and I can't imagine any of them getting relisted just thanks to how many different licenses are in literally every single game. So you're gonna have to dust off the old console if you want to play this one, but it's totally worth it. If you've never played this game and you like Monster Jam, I think you should go try it. If you're looking for a decent racer and you got a PS3 hooked up or a 360, go ahead and try it. But anyway, that's enough for today. I've talked enough about Monster Jam and Monster Jam trucks. Maybe I'll be back in a few years to make another updated ranking. Maybe we'll finally have a game that's better than Path of Destruction, but at this point, I kind of doubt it unless we get a more simulation-based game. Let me know down below what your favorite Monster Jam game is. If you made it to this part, you can comment Gravedigger, that's our secret code word. You made it to the end of the video, you will get a heart from me and I will very much appreciate it. So, hope you all have a wonderful day, go hug your loved ones and stay safe y'all. Bye bye.